Welcome aboard the Strange Express. My name is Dr. Scherzo Stantio. Do you like detective stories? If so, you're in for a real treat today. We have a detective of the old school of hard-boiled detectives. His name is Jocko Clubbs. So please, find a seat and make yourself comfortable, as I believe I just heard the engineer give the signal that we're about to be on our way. I hope you enjoy this adventure of Jocko Clubbs as he solves the mystery of the Sicilian Pigeon. Like the man said, my name is Jocko Clubbs. I'm not just one of the pack. I'm the best darn detective in the city of Wolf Downs. I've handled some tough cases before, but this one almost cost me everything. It started on a hot summer evening. The stifling air drifted through my open window, carrying the fragrance of the landfill that is next to my office. Somehow, I had drifted off to sleep, but the last rays of the sun beaming through the window had awakened me. So I rose, and I was about to close up shop and head home for the evening, when I remembered that I'd been evicted from my apartment and slept on the sofa that I kept in my office for the last 2 days. I blessed the day when I rescued that sofa from the landfill. Yeah, it smelled funky as a week-old fish sandwich, and it seemed unusually sticky in places. But hey, the price couldn't be beat. So I closed the office window and headed for the front door of my office to lock up for the night. As I approached the front door, I could see a woman's figure standing in front of it through the frosted glass. I saw her reach for the doorknob to open the door, but then she hesitated and drew her hand away. After she repeated this process a second time, I reached out and quickly flung the door open and said, "Please, come in." I must have startled her. She stood there, frozen for a moment. She looked like a bear in the headlights, and I waited for her to show her teeth. She did, but fortunately, it was in the form of a smile. She was gorgeous. She had curves that would make an Italian sports car jealous, if you know what I mean. A red-haired beauty. She walked into the outer office and eyed the decor, and her smile disappeared, and she scrunched her nose as though she just walked into the public restroom of a gas station on a busy interstate. I saw the look and said, "I apologize for the unpleasant aroma. Unfortunately, my office is situated next door to a public landfill." She replied,
"I'm aware of that, but still."
Her voice trailed off, and I'm not sure how she finished that sentence. I felt it was better not to pursue the subject, so I replied, "Welcome to Clubbs Detective Agency. How may I be of service to you, Ms.
Weathersby? Yes, that's it, Miss Weathersby. That's my name."
"Very well, Miss Weathersby. Please step into my inner office," I said, gesturing her toward the room where I meet with my clients, which also contains my prized sofa. I stepped behind my desk and said, "Please, sit down," this time gesturing to the sofa. She looked at the sofa, and the wrinkled nose look returned to her face. Spotting her hesitancy, I assured her, "Don't worry, it hasn't eaten anyone yet." Miss Weathersby gave me a forced smile and gingerly sat down, almost as though she expected the sofa to contain a landmine. I sat down behind my desk and leaned over it toward her, and I asked, "So, what brings you to the Club Detective Agency?"
"Desperation,"
she replied.
"Pure desperation. I am staying at the Wolf Downs Motor Court, and I told them that I needed a good detective."
"Ah," I said, "so they recommended me?"
"No,"
she answered.
"They gave me several recommendations, but since it was so late, all of their offices were already closed for the day. So, you see, desperation brings me here."
Yeah, I answered. Let me get this straight. In their several recommendations, they did not even mention me? Jocko Clubbs?
Well, yes,
she replied.
The manager, Mr. Bates, said that you were a real card, a joker, and that as a detective, you couldn't find your own. Now, what was it he said? Anyway, he said that you couldn't find some part of your own anatomy with both hands, and that...
I cut her off at this point and replied, yeah, well, there is some bad blood between us. You see, there was this tiny little incident a few years ago. I was doing some surveillance on one of his tenants, and one thing led to another, and there was some gunfire. Several car windows were shot out, and then there was the fire, and that old guy who had a heart attack after I accidentally knocked him down the stairway. Bates is unreasonable, and he blamed it all on me. But I assure you that I am the best private investigator in Wolf Downs. So, let's get down to cases. Why do you need the services of a detective?
I need you to recover some stolen property.
I was a bit puzzled by this request, so I asked, did you say stolen property? Please understand, I'm not one who would turn away a potential paycheck, but if you have property stolen, then it sounds like you need the services of law enforcement. You are a taxpayer, aren't you? Besides, with all their resources, they would likely recover your property much more quickly than my little operation ever could.
I've thought of that,
she answered.
But there are complications.
Isn't that always the story? I answered. So tell me, why don't you want to involve the police?
It's complicated,
she replied. Good, I answered curtly. I was afraid you were going to tell me that the complications were simplistic. You're spinning your wheels, lady. Get to the point or take your problem somewhere else. This is not only my office, but currently it's my boudoir. You are currently warming my bunk with your underside. Or is it that you're warming my underside with your bunk? No, I think I had it right the first time. Anyway, there's nothing that I like less than warm bunk on a hot summer night. And I'm definitely getting the impression that you were giving me some warm bunk. Miss Withersby stared at me as though I just swallowed a live goldfish in her presence. No, it looked more like she had just swallowed a live goldfish. Finally, she stammered out.
It's just that I can't prove that the property is mine. It's an art object and has passed from one owner to another through the years. The name of the original owner has been forgotten during the passing eons. Most people who have owned it obtained it by either subterfuge or outright theft. I only learned of its existence because my fiancé, who works as a curator for a museum, has so much interest in it.
If the previous owners stole it or obtained it by subterfuge, how did you obtain it? I asked.
My fiancé, through his contacts, found the current owner lives here in Wolf Downs, and called him to see if he could purchase it from him, but my fiancé could not afford the asking price that the man was requesting on his meager curator's salary. I saw how disappointed that my fiancé was that he couldn't afford to purchase it, so I contacted the man myself, and since I came into a substantial inheritance a few years ago, I was able to meet his price. I wanted to purchase it as a wedding gift for my fiancé.
I paused for a moment and thought, and then I asked her, how did the man that you bought it from obtain it? She glanced up at the ceiling and then replied,
he had it stolen from a character that was supposedly some kind of warlord, but the warlord and his entire clan were wiped out years ago.
Interesting, I replied, and added, so that's your story.
You don't believe me?
She exclaimed. Oh, I always believe my clients, until I find out they're lying to me, I answered. I then asked, what information can you give me about your stolen art object? What's it called? What does it look like? Did you bring any photos? Miss Withersby shuffled on the old sofa a little and moved her arm that was resting on one of the throw pillows. Unfortunately, the pillow stuck to her arm, and she had to fling it off. Seemingly annoyed, she snapped at me.
Can't you open the window and hear? How can you stand that smell?
I replied, I'm sorry, lady. I think that's just a broccoli, bean, and cabbage souffle that I had for lunch. And you know what they say? More room on the outside than on the inside. As I said this, I made my way over to the window and added, this isn't going to help, you know. The atmosphere is provided courtesy of the landfill next door, and just like clients who show up at closing time, it seems to come in at will. I glanced out the window. As I started to open it, I noticed that there was 3 cars in my parking lot. My car, a silver convertible, and a black Continental that appeared to be driving through. As I watched, the Continental pulled out my parking lot and drove away. I opened the window and propped it up with an empty whiskey bottle that was on the floor. A memento from a previous case. It'd been a very good case, but now, back to the case at hand. I turned back to Miss Weathersby and asked, "So, what information can you provide me with to help me get started on recovering your art object?" Miss Weathersby was looking down at her lap, and without looking up said,
"Lore has it that it was created in Sicily. It's believed that it was taken by Roman General Scipio during the Second Punic War and he put it on a sailing vessel to carry it back to Italy, but the ship was captured by Greek pirates who, it's believed, carried it off to Egypt."
I interrupted Miss Weathersby. "I like history as much as the next guy, but I'm really looking for information that'll help me recover your stolen art object. As I said before, what is it called? What does it look like? Are there any photos that I can look at?" She finally looked up from her lap and looked directly at me and said,
"I just wanted to give you some history about it, because I want you to understand that it is an authentic art object, because when I give you the details that you are asking for, you may doubt its authenticity."
"Put your mind at ease," I answered. "I'm not an art authority or an appraiser. I'm a private investigator. You say that someone stole something from you, and you want me to get it back. If you value it enough to pay my fee, the item's actual value or authenticity as an art object is immaterial to me." Miss Weathersby looked relieved and began,
"The object is known as the Sicilian Pigeon. It's about 8 inches high, and about 2.5 inches wide. It looks like a pigeon. It's ceramic and the surface had no finish, but sometime in the 18th century it was painted brown."
I stood up and paced around the room and said, "I appreciate you telling me that the Sicilian pigeon looks like a pigeon. That was most helpful. I take it that you don't have any actual photos of it. Do you have any additional information that'll help me locate and recover it for you?" Miss Weathersby looked up from where she was sitting and said,
"I do believe that I know who stole it from me."
"Really?" I answered. "Who do you believe stole it, and why do you suspect them?"
"The name of the man is Ivan Mogat,"
she answered.
"Within hours of my purchase of the pigeon, I was visited by 2 men that work for Mogat. One of them was named Jerry Aswan. I remember him distinctly as he reeked of gardenia. I think he broke the bottle and didn't want any to go to waste. The other guy was a slimy little creep named Willie something."
"The killer kid, Willie Fry," I interjected.
"He probably will. He's a greasy little monster, and I believe this state does employ the electric chair."
"No," I answered. "You misunderstood. His name is Willie Fry. He and Aswan are known confederates of Mogat, better known in the underworld as the really, really obese guy. To attract his attention, your art object must have a value that breaks 6 figures. So, shortly after you purchased the pigeon, you were visited by Mogat's henchmen. So what happened?"
"Well,"
she answered,
"they said that Mr. Mogat had requested my presence, and when I declined their invitation, that little slime ball, Willie, intimated that I would either accompany them to see Mogat, or he was going to toss me against the walls to see how well I bounced. I didn't take the little pissant too seriously until I noticed that he was sporting 2 automatics when the flaps of his jacket came open. I accompanied them to see Mogat, and he sent the gardenia and the slime ball away while we talked. He told me that he was aware that I recently purchased the pigeon and that he wanted to buy it from me, and even offered a price that would have netted me an excellent profit, but I turned it down, as the pigeon was to be a wedding present for my fiancé as a token of my love. He had food brought in and continued to make offers, but I told him that I didn't intend to sell for any price. I realize now that he was just stalling me while his helpers were searching my room, as he concluded his offers after that Willie guy came back and gave him a nod. He had them take me back to the motor court, and when I went back into my room, I could see it had been ransacked and the pigeon was gone. That's when I started looking for a private detective to help me get my property back."
"So, where's Mogat staying?" I asked. She looked at me incredulously and said,
"He was staying at Schmaley Underarms Lodge over in Chuggalug. Do you think he'll still be there?"
"Probably not," I answered. "But unless you know where he's at now, I have to start somewhere. What room was he in?"
"He was in Suite 12. Are you going there this evening?"
she asked. "Just as soon as we settle up on the little matter of my fee." I was feeling pretty good as I drove down to Chuggalug. Miss Weathersby had paid me a very gracious retainer, and we made a deal where I would not only receive my usual fees, but she was going to pay me a 5% recovery fee based on what she paid for the pigeon, once I got it back for her. When I arrived at the Schmaley Underarms Lodge, I wandered around the place looking for the house detective, who was an old friend and a former police detective named Duke. Duke had been thrown off the force due to his eyesight. He needed glasses to solve his cases. So many glasses that he ended up being blind drunk. Duke wasn't a bad guy, though. It's just that he never learned that bending the elbow was doing more for his wrist and arm muscles than it was doing for his brain. He also had a penchant for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. like the guy that sits down with a terminal cancer patient and greets them with, "So, what's eating you?" I finally found him in his office, feet up on his desk, polishing off the stale remnants of the continental breakfast from that morning. When he saw me walk in, he swung his feet off the desk, brushed the powdered sugar and donut crumbs off his shirt, stood up, grinned, and grabbed my hand and shook it.
Jocko Clubbs, he said. How's the private peeper business? Shot out any car windows lately?
I grimaced. It was below the belt, but I shot back. "Duke, I'm here on a hot tip. Rumor has it that the house stick for the stump is sober today." Duke's grin disappeared for a moment, but then it returned and he said,
"It's nothing but a filthy lie."
Then spread his arms apart and stepped closer to me in preparation to give me a big bear hug, but he stopped mid-step and then reversed course. Duke raised his arms to his face and coughed out,
"You've gotta get out of that office more often. You're starting to smell like that landfill."
"Actually, it's my new cologne. They call it Canal Number 5. You like it? I'll buy you a gallon for Christmas."
"Jocko,"
he answered,
"I have never considered personal hygiene as one of your strong points, but I have reconsidered. Perhaps it is one of your strongest points. Woo! So, what brings the great private eye to the big city?"
"One of your guests, or at least he was one of your guests." Immediately, Duke's face lit up like someone set fire to the Christmas tree.
"You must be talking about the walrus in Suite 12.
"Yeah," I answered, "the really, really obese guy." Duke nodded and said,
"I recognized him when he checked in a few days ago. Afterwards, I checked the register and he actually used his real name. What's he up to, Jocko?"
"I'm not sure yet," I answered, "and as far as I know, he hasn't broken any laws so far, but he is testing them for tensile strength." "What's he been doing here?" Duke shook his head.
"As far as I know, he hasn't done anything. He hasn't even gone out to eat. He's been getting his meals sent in, but his boys, Larry and Curly, are in and out all times of the day. Then there's that woman. She's been in and out of that room a few times too. Good looker too, that one."
"Red hair and about 5'8", I asked.
"Yeah,"
Duke replied.
"That sounds like her. Who is she, Jocko?"
"Lucille Ball," I quipped. Duke gave me an odd look and said,
"I don't think so, Jocko. I saw Lucille Ball in a movie once, and I don't think it's the same woman."
I wasn't sure if Duke knew I was putting him on and just giving it back to me, or if keeping his foot on the rail too long had caused all the blood to drain out of his head. Either way, I had no intention of getting in a long, drawn-out conversation with him about my client. "It was just a wild guess," I said. "Maybe I'll pay Mr. Mogan a call and see what I can find out." I turned and I started to walk out of Duke's office, and he called out to me.
"Let me know if you find out anything I should know about,"
I replied. "Will do. See you soon." On my way over to Suite 12, I noticed a familiar black Continental in the parking lot. I checked my watch, and it was a little after 8 p.m. I rapped gently on the door, and after a moment the door opened just a crack, and 2 beady eyes were preceded by the strong aroma of gardenia. A muffled voice called out, "Go away! We don't want any." I answered, "I'm here to see Mugget," the voice responded. "Mr. Mugget has already retired for the evening. Perhaps you can return in the morning." The door started to close, but it got stuck on something. That something was my foot. The voice called out, "You seem to have your foot in the door." I grinned and said, "I know. It's a habit I picked up back when I was doing a stint as a vacuum cleaner salesman. It was just one of the many things about that job that sucked." "That's funny," the voice answered. "I once had a job as a therapist. I'll help you break it. Your foot, that is, not the habit." Leaning against the door to force it to open further and prevent damage to my steel-toed shoes, I called out, "Now, Morning Glory, you needed to ask for a refund on that correspondence course on being a tough guy. If you don't open the door for Papa, Papa will have to spank." He didn't answer me, but then I heard the voice of an older man, whom I presumed to be Moga, calling out, "What's going on out there, Jerry?" Aswan stopped trying to force the door shut and answered the older man. "Some guy is trying to force his way in. He says he's here to see you. I advised him that you had already retired and to come back tomorrow, but he won't take no for an answer." I heard Mogan sigh, and then he asked Aswan, "Well, what does he want?" Aswan answered, "He didn't say." Aswan then turned his attention back to me and said, "Mr. Mogan wants you to state your business." I answered loudly enough that I was sure that Mogan heard me. "I want to talk to Mr. Mogan about the pigeon." I heard Mogan call out, "Willie, please come to the foyer," followed shortly by, "Go ahead, Jerry, let him in." Aswan then said to me, "Mr. Mogan has agreed to see you. Please remove your foot from the door so I can remove the chain." I removed my foot from the door, and the door closed and then opened back again, and Jerry Aswan extended his arm into the room, gesturing that I should enter. I entered as Aswan closed the door behind me, and I quickly surveyed the room, and besides Aswan at the door, I saw Mr. 5x5, sporting a dressing gown made of with enough material to cover a battleship, and still have enough left over to provide a small circus with ample canvas. He was just past the foyer. Standing just to the right of the really, really obese guy was the very image of the stereotypical old-time gangster. Greasy hair, all slicked back, button-down dress shirt with a loud tie that was tucked in his shirt about halfway down. He wasn't sporting his jacket, and so his twin shoulder holsters were in plain view, one of which was empty, as he had that automatic in his left hand trained on my midsection. I wondered at the necessity of 2 guns. Did he think he was in the Wild West, or was he just afraid of being lopsided? I noticed that one prop was missing to complete the costume, so I said, "If you'll be kind enough to point that artillery in a different direction, I'll promise I'll try to help you find your toothpick." I was mistaken, though, and he grinned as the toothpick slid out of the left side of his mouth, but the gun didn't waver. Then Mogan spoke.
"Until we know who you are and why you're here, we choose to keep our tactical advantage."
"Fair enough," I answered. "My name is Jocko Clubbs. I'm a private investigator. I'm working for a client who's asked me to put out some feelers with regard to an object known as the Sicilian Pigeon." Mogan shifted his considerable weight from one foot to the other, gave me a pained look and answered.
"Why does that bring you to my door in the middle of the night?"
"Quite simply," I responded. "I'm told that the rightful owner of the pigeon lives locally, but apparently the pigeon has unexpectedly flown the coop. I have certain contacts that advise me that Von Mogan has recently arrived in our community, and if there's anyone that would have knowledge of an art object being up for grabs, it would be Mr. Mogan. I presume that you are Mr. Mogan."
"Alas,"
the rotund man answered,
"that is one charge to which I must plead guilty. And this,"
he said, gesturing to the gun slow on his right,
"is my associate, Mr. Fry. And the gentleman behind you that met you at the door is Mr. Aswan. Please, let us proceed to the drawing room and continue this conversation, as I must sit down. I've been standing for over 3 minutes and my legs are killing me."
Aswan brushed past me, almost breaking into a run, running past Mogan as well, and Mogan waddled behind him. Fry motioned me with his gun to follow Mogan, and Fry drove the rear of the parade with his gun still drawn. When we arrived in the drawing room, Aswan had pushed 2 solidly built straight-back chairs together for Mogan to sit on, and Fry again used his drawn gun to motion me to an empty chair. I took the seat, and Fry remained standing and took position in the corner of the room, arms crossed, with the automatic still in his hand. Aswan stood behind Mogan, though he seemed thoroughly winded by the short trip from the foyer to the drawing room. Mogan spoke first.
"Hopefully you are comfortable. Unfortunately, none of the furniture in this establishment was designed for someone of my girth, so I'm forced to improvise. Now, you say you're trying to locate a missing art object, and you want my assistance in locating it. What was the name of the object again?"
I leaned back in the chair and said, "Mr. Mogan, please don't be coy with me. You know the name of the art object, and I didn't say that I'm trying to locate it."
"Very well,"
Mogan replied.
"As far as I know, it's an open market, but for the record, I will state categorically that I do not have it, and furthermore, I do not know where it's at, although I do have some ideas. I suspect that you do as well. If you'd like to, we can pull our resources to retrieve it. I can assure you that working for me will be far more lucrative than working against me."
I answered, "I doubt it'd be helpful to either of us." Mogan shifted in his chairs and said,
"Why do you say that? Do you not trust me?"
"It's not a matter of trust," I answered. "I apologize if I gave you that impression. As I mentioned, my client has asked me to see if there's a market and has not indicated if they plan to be a buyer or a seller. You see, I really don't have any information yet that would be helpful to you. How much of your information are you willing to part with in exchange for nothing?" After 3 or 4 seconds of silence, I added, "That's what I thought. As to working for you, I already have a client, and it would be a conflict of interest to try to work for both of you, and it would be bad business to abandon one client in the middle of the case to work for another. Oh, by the way, when I arrived, I stopped and spoke to the house detective, and he indicated that you have another associate, one that he said would be worth my while to me. A red-haired lady." I winked at Mogan as I said this. Mogan tried to stifle it, but he gave a little laugh and said,
"Now who's being coy with who?" The house detective must have been referring to Ms. O'Slawnasty. She is no longer with us, as I'm sure you're aware. We had a bit of a falling out when it was discovered that she was being less than forthright with us. If you should see her, you could let her know that if she would like, I'm still willing to honor our original bargain."
"If I see her, I'll let her know," I answered. "Well, it looks like I struck out on all accounts, but I appreciate you meeting with me, and I apologize for barging in at this late hour. I can find my way out." I stood up as I said this.
"So soon, Mr. Clubbs?"
Mogan asked.
"You've only just arrived. Stay and talk a while. I find your conversation, shall we say, amusing."
I glanced over at Willie Fry, and his arms were no longer crossed. and he was grinning as he pointed his gun at me again. So I said, I'm perfectly happy to stay and talk. I've always enjoyed talking. I was captain of the debating team in high school. Perhaps Willie and I could do a talk on the death penalty. I would be pro and he could be con. Then to make it really interesting, we could switch sides, and he could be pro. Again, I glanced over at Willie. The grin was gone. I continued, no, I could see from his face that he wouldn't like to do that.
Willie!
Mogut yelled.
Put your gun away. That's just being cordial with Mr. Clubbs. It was not my intention to detain you. I apologize for misunderstanding, Mr. Clubbs. Mr. Fry is sometimes over impulsive. Jerry, please see Mr. Clubbs to the door.
No problem, I said to Mogut. I just figured that he missed his last feeding. Fry flashed me an angry look. This time I smiled at him and said, you've got to stop showing your teeth all the time. If you keep it up, you're going to run into somebody that'll defang you. I then went through the door that Aslan was holding open for me and headed back to my car. As I drove back to my office, all the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. It looked like I needed to get back with my client and see if she wanted to clarify her story for me. When I got back to my office, I gave her a call, and we agreed to meet at a park that was a few miles removed from the landfill the next morning. I was about 10 minutes late when I got to the park the next morning. On my way over, I'd seen the black Continental in my rear view and decided I would lose my tail before I met with my client. When I arrived at the park, I found my client leaning against a silver convertible with her arms crossed. She was wearing a dress with a floral pattern, and while I've never been a plant lover, I caught myself admiring her blooms. She looked peeved, so when I got out of my car, I immediately apologized for running late. Her expression changed, and she brightened and said,
I don't have much on the calendar for today anyway.
I said, let's take a walk. We began strolling down one of the footpaths, and she asked me if I'd made any progress. I told her that I had gone and seen Mogut the night before, and I had learned quite a bit. She stopped and asked me,
You spoke to Mogut?
I stopped too and answered, in the flesh, pun intended. I saw the anger flash on her face for a second time that day as she almost screamed at me.
Jocko, how could you be so stupid?
There were people nearby, and her loud outburst was drawing their attention. I answered, practice makes perfect, I'm told. She didn't seem to be amused by my response and continued.
Mogut's not an idiot. He'll figure out that I hired you to help me retrieve the pigeon, and he'll disappear with it and I'll never get it back.
I looked around to indicate the crowd that was gathering to observe us, and said, let's walk a little further. We went down the trail until we were out of sight of the observers. I continued, don't fret about Mogut. We just convened to participate in a lying contest. And that brings me to item number 2. You may recall that I told you that I always believe my clients until I found out they're lying to me. We're at that point now. I don't believe you anymore. But, for today only, you have the opportunity to get back in my good graces if you open up and tell me the truth. From your real name to what makes an old ceramic pigeon so valuable, and what is your actual relationship to Mogut. As we continue to walk, I said, by the way, Mogut doesn't have it.
What are you saying?
She asked.
He must have it.
This time, I stopped walking and said to her, I'll explain once you level with me and answer my questions. If I catch you in one more lie, lady, I'm done. So tell me your story again, but this time leave out the fairy tales. She stood there for a moment, but she didn't say anything. She just stared at me like I just told her that she had B.O. Finally, she spoke.
Okay, Jocko, I'll level with you. Mogut had tracked down the dupe that owned the pigeon. He had inherited it, but apparently he didn't have a clue about its value. To him, it was just an ugly ceramic paperweight with an uglier brown paint job. Mogut wanted to get the pigeon in such a way that the mark wouldn't get suspicious about its value. I had worked with a really obese guy a few times in the past, and he called on me to get friendly with the mark and convince him to part with the pigeon in a way that he wouldn't realize that he was giving away a fortune. One day while I was at the dupe's apartment, I accidentally discovered the pigeon, and went on about how cute and adorable it was, and within a few minutes, he had given me the pigeon as a present. When I got back to my room at the motor court, I hid the pigeon and called Mogut to see if I could renegotiate our agreement. He indicated that he was agreeable to altering our bargain, only I didn't realize that the alteration he was referring to was him taking the pigeon and giving me nothing.
Honor among thieves. Anger flashed in her face again, and she said,
Nothing was stolen, and there is nothing wrong with trying to get a better deal for yourself.
Calm down, I answered. Perhaps I was only referring to Mogut not paying you for your services. So tell me, what is it that makes the pigeon so valuable, besides being old? She calmed down and answered,
Its eyes. They're actually a matched set of cashmere sapphires, each weighing over 40 carats. That's the reason that the statuette was painted over, to hide those beautiful blue sapphires.
That's what I figured, I interrupted. Except I figured the stones would be rubies, since the bird was a pigeon. By the way, you never told me your real name. She glanced away, looking into the woods. Finally, she turned back to me and said,
Silliness, Frigid silliness. Now tell me, what makes you think that Moga doesn't have the pigeon? Are you saying someone else ransacked my room?
That's possible, I answered. I'd considered that, but I doubt it. No, last night when I ran down to Chug-a-Lug, I expected to find Mogat and crew had evaporated like spit on a radiator, but there they were, big and ugly as warts on an elephant. Mogat doesn't have the pigeon. If he did, he wouldn't endure the inconvenience of having to stay at a place that doesn't even have a decent chair for him to sit in. He said that he has a pretty good idea where the pigeon's at, but I don't think he has a clue. You see, he thinks that you still have it. He had you tailed, you know. You had to have noticed that big black tank following you. Either Jerry or Willie even followed you last night when you came to my office, and today they tried to follow me to this meeting. That's why I was late. I gave them the scenic tour of Wolf Downs before I was able to lose them. They should probably rent a fire engine. It would be less obvious.
Well,
Miss O'Slawnasty asked.
If Moga doesn't have it, and I don't have it, then who does have it?
Obviously, I answered. Either Jerry or Willie, or remote possibility both. But if I were a betting man, I would put my money on Jerry. Willie is Mogat's hired gun, and nothing in Willie's history indicates a bent towards anything other than strong-arming and intimidation. That, and the fact that Mogat basically rescued Willie from the gutter, or so the story goes. I believe that Willie is loyal to Mogat. Jerry, on the other hand, has a checkered past that includes both con games and theft, often freelance. I also suspect that Jerry is the one telling us, as he wants to make sure that neither you nor I have the opportunity to compare notes with Mogat. He certainly didn't want me to see him last night. He's probably told Mogat that he's following you in order to find out where you've hidden the pigeon. If he's smart, he's likely looking for an out, too. He can't just disappear. Mogat would figure out what happened in a heartbeat, and there'd be no place for him to hide.
So,
she asked,
what's our next move then?
Before we make any other plans, I answered, let's talk about how this story ends. Who gets the dingus?
Why, I do.
She answered.
It was given to me as a gift.
That, I replied, could become a sticky proposition in the eyes of the law, since you were deceptive in obtaining it.
It's not my fault that he didn't know the value of the gift he gave me.
She answered. I think you're missing the point. I'm not a lawyer and I don't pretend to be one, I responded. But if the former owner claims that you obtained it fraudulently, then you may have a problem. I recommend that you return it and tell him that you've learned of the great value of the piece. Of course, you don't have to tell him when you learned of its value. He may reward you generously for your honesty.
Or, he may give me nothing,
was her response. That's possible, I answered. Like I said before, as long as you're paying the freight, I'll do my best to deliver. Once I deliver, it's up to you what you do with the goods. As far as the next step, I want you to go back to your room at the auto court and wait for me. Lock your door, and don't let anyone in except me. I'm heading back to my office to get my equalizer, and then go back and pay Mogat and crew a visit. Hopefully catch either Jerry or Willie alone, and find out where the pigeon is hidden. Failing that, I'll try to convince Mogat that one of his boys is holding out on him, and then watch the fireworks. And when the fireworks are over, collect the pigeon and make like the invisible man.
Jocko,
she said.
Is that your plan B?
Yes, I answered, but believe me, I'm going to try really hard to make plan A work. She gave me a crooked smile and said,
You gave me some advice, so I'm going to give you some advice. Come up with a plan C.
Actually, I said, I have. It involves an undertaker, a pine box, and a slab with my name engraved on it.
That's not what I meant, Jocko. Please, be careful.
I smiled at her and said, that's why I have plan C, to remind myself of the consequences if I'm not. On my drive back to my office, I tried to work out in my head how I would execute plan A. By the time I arrived at my office, I had formulated, in general, how I hoped it would go down. When I unlocked my office door and stepped inside, I was immediately aware that something was wrong. My eye was immediately drawn toward the window in my inner office. It was propped open with a book, and I know I had closed it before I left the office. And I would never use a book as a window prop. Even more disturbing was the strong smell of gardenia. From a few feet behind me, I heard the voice of Jerry Aswan say, Please, don't turn around, Mr. Clubbs. Don't even move. If you move, Papa will have to shoot. I stood still and said, You don't strike me as the kind to carry hardware. Aswan snickered a bit and said, "Oh, ye little thing, you want proof? Tell me where you want the hole." Remaining still, I answered, "Are you really going to give me a choice?" "If you insist," he answered. "Okay," I replied. "How about a nice, clean one in your head?" Aswan snickered again and said, "You are so very amusing. You can relax and turn around now. I just wanted to get even for last night." As I turned to face him, I said, "Oh, you mean the Papa Spank comment? I only said it because I thought you'd like it." Aswan stood there, his little 25 brownie trained on me. If he was still amused, he was hiding it well. He ignored my witty rejoinder and said, "Also, I should thank you for the scenic tour of your quaint little hamlet this morning." "You only say hamlet because something stinks in Denmark," I answered. "But it's like I tell everyone, it's not me, it's the landfill." Aswan was starting to show annoyance. "Can anyone have a conversation with you without your feeble attempts at cracking lies?" "Sorry about that," I answered. "It's the guy that writes my dialogue. He's not very good, so I talk like a stereotype. By the way, you're boring. What's your excuse?" Without missing a beat, Aswan answered, "Same writer. So, before you fall asleep, let me get to the point. I found the pigeon in Mrs. Slawnasty's room. When Willie and I searched it, Willie didn't know I found it, so no one knows that I have it except you and I. I find myself in the awkward position of having custody of a valuable item, but I have no way to dispose of said item without endangering my life. You and Mrs. Slawnasty, on the other hand, could, by way of proxy, shall we say, do so with very minimal risk." "What do you mean," I asked, "when you say, by way of proxy?" Aswan smiled and answered, "What I mean is I have possession of the item. I have the contacts, and it'll be my life that is on the line if anything goes wrong. So, I will be the one actually handling the sale." "Okay," I asked. "What makes you so sure that our lives are any less danger than yours if we agree to go through with your plan?" "Because Mr. Mogut would expect such actions from you. You are something of unknown quantity, and Mrs. Slawnasty is a contractor that Mr. Mogut has used from time to time." Aswan began. "I, on the other hand, am an employee. He would regard such behavior from me as the most severe treachery, and he would make an example of me to prevent such betrayal from happening again in the future. Don't misunderstand, though. I cannot guarantee that he will not accept revenge on either one or both of you, but I do not think it's in his nature, and I believe that the deal that I offer will make that risk acceptable." "What is your deal?" I asked. Aswan looked like he was deep in thought, and then said, "I will reveal that once Mrs. Slawnasty is present. I want all three of us in this room. That way I will not have to repeat myself. I want you to give her a call and ask her to come here. Tell her that I want to offer a deal, and she is to come here immediately." I started toward the phone on my desk, but then said, "What if she doesn't want to come here? Why don't we just take my car? Or better yet, we can take your car." "No," he said curtly. "Why not?" I asked. "For numerous reasons," he replied, "but primarily because I don't trust you any more than you trust me." I half leaned, half sat on the corner of my desk and picked up the handset of the phone. I started to reach into my jacket pocket to retrieve the card that I had written the phone number for the motor cord on, and as I did, Aswan called out, "Careful," and he extended his hand and was still holding the brownie. I answered, "Relax, I'm just getting the phone number. It's on a card in my pocket." I pulled the card out of my pocket and showed it to Aswan, and he nodded. I put the handset up to my ear and I heard the dial tone. I called the number written on the card. The voice on the other end of the line said,
Wolf Downs Motor Court. How can I help you?
I answered, "Please connect me to room 214. The voice on the phone answered,
One moment, please.
I moved the face of the telephone from my desk to my lap. As I made this move, I deliberately pressed the plunger and disconnected the call, but it was done in such a way that Aswan didn't see it. I again heard the sound of the dial tone. After a moment, I started talking with the dial tone. "Hi, Bridget. It's Jocko. Yeah, everything's fine. When I got back to my office, Aswan was here. He says he wants to offer us a deal." "Yeah. That's right. I don't know. He won't tell me. He says he wants you to come over right away, and he'll tell both of us." "I'm telling you everything I know. He's not giving me any more information. He said he'll tell both of us when you get here." "Again, you're asking the wrong guy. He hasn't told me anything." Okay, I'll ask him." I cut the mouthpiece in my hand and held the handset up in the air and looked over at Aswan, and I pursed my lips and blew out air in an expression of exasperation. Afterwards, I said, I've told her to come over, but she wants me to give her more details, and she keeps asking questions. I told her that I don't have any of the answers, so now she's insisting that I put you on the phone. I could see the wheels turning in Aswan's head again, so I said, you want me to say that you don't want to talk to her? Aswan then said, no, give me the phone. I said, you'll have to come over here. The phone company only gave me 6 foot of cable, so it won't reach over to where you are. Aswan walked right up to where I was standing with the phone in my hand. As he reached out to take the phone out of my hand, I gave it to him, right across the temple, while simultaneously reaching out with my other hand to make sure that if he pulled the trigger on the Browning, that it would only damage my desk. He was not able to discharge the weapon. As he went down, I was able to remove the Browning from his grip. Understand, my phone is not one of those new vinyl or plastic phones. I still have the old-fashioned solid fake-like phone. If Aswan wasn't out, he must have really liked the smell of my carpet. I put the Browning in my jacket pocket and the phone down on my desk, and I carried Aswan over to my couch and unceremoniously dropped him on it. While checking to make sure that he didn't have any other weapons, I found a locker key in the breast pocket. Locally, there are only 2 places that had lockers: the bus station and the local park where Ms. O'Slaw-Nasty and I had met earlier. I'd used both facilities at various times, and Aswan's key was definitely from the bus station. I went to the window and removed the pull cord from the curtains that hung there, and used it to tie the hands and feet of the unconscious Aswan. With his hands secured behind his back and his feet tied together, I rolled him over on his stomach and double-checked the knots. I was certain that he remained secure long enough for me to drive over to the bus station and check the contents of the locker. It was there, unceremoniously stuffed into a wrinkled and tattered brown paper grocery bag. When I got back to the office, I found Aswan wriggling on his stomach on the floor. Apparently, he really did like the smell of my carpet. He had knocked over a corner lamp table and broke the lamp that was on it, and was using a shard from the broken pieces to try to cut through the cords on his wrists. The cord looked a little frayed where he'd been rubbing it with the shard. He had been crying out for help when I entered, saying something about being kidnapped, but he quieted down once he saw me. I spoke to him as I stepped over him. You're doing a great job there on that cord. Keep it up and you should be free within half an hour. I went over to my desk and put the bag with the pigeon down next to the phone. I took Aswan's Browning out of my pocket, removed all the bullets, and repocketed them, and I laid the Browning down next to the phone in the bag. I retrieved a pair of scissors from my desk and stooped down and cut through the cords that bound Aswan. He struggled to get up and was brushing himself off. I said, you really shouldn't be wallowing down there. I believe that the spot where you were lying is where all of my boogers land. While gingerly touching the lump that had risen on the side of his head with 2 fingers, Aswan wrinkled his face with a look of utter disgust and said, I have never been so humiliated in all my life. Really? I asked. You must have not lived very long then. Don't worry though. I'm sure there will be plenty of other opportunities. I went back to my desk and returned the scissors to the drawer. As I came back to the front of my desk, I picked the Browning up and handed it to Aswan. As I expected, he immediately pointed it at me and said, hand over that bag or I'll shoot you. I smiled and answered, you really need to talk to that writer. You're so one-dimensional that it's painful. Go ahead, knock yourself out. If that doesn't work out, just ask me. I'll do it for you. Angered, Aswan pulled the trigger a couple of times. As it clicked, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the bullets that I'd removed just a couple of minutes earlier and displayed them in my palm to Aswan. Aswan then reared back as though he was about to throw the Browning at me, but he hesitated, as he must have realized that if he didn't render me unconscious, which was unlikely, they would probably spend the next few minutes laying among the boogers again. Aswan made a very ugly face at me. I asked, do you need a ride? I didn't see your car when I drove up. No, he answered. I parked around back where it wouldn't be visible. He sounded so dejected that I almost felt sorry for him. But I answered, I hope you didn't damage any of my prized starfish cactus plants. Is that what those disgusting things are? He answered, well, they keep the flies out of my office. I replied, if you damaged them, I'll send you a bill, along with a bill for the broken lamp and the jimmied window. Aswan stumbled toward the back door of my office like a drunken June bug trying to climb up the stripe of a spinning barber pole. I heard him shout once more as he made his exit, send the bills to your client. She should have plenty of money. All in all, I guess everything turned out pretty well. I took the Sicilian Pigeon over to my client, and she promised to pay my usual fees, and possibly a bonus once she made a deal for the pigeon. I was patient, as she had paid me a decent retainer. After a few weeks passed, though, I began to think I was never going to receive any additional payment, but one afternoon, she waltzed into my office while I was sitting at my desk reading a trade journal. When I saw her enter, I quickly closed it, put it in one of my desk drawers, and locked it. I stood up, and she smiled and handed me an envelope that was inscribed with one word, thanks. She was grinning like a worm that had swallowed the canary that ate the cat. She twisted and shimmied a little celebration dance, and she said,
I think you are going to like what you find in that envelope.
I'm not picky, I answered. As long as it's cash money,
Jocko,
she said.
I have so much to thank you for. I followed your advice, you know.
I didn't remember offering any advice, so I asked, what advice was that?
I gave the pigeon back to Osgood.
Oh, I replied. Osgood being the guy that originally gave you the pigeon?
Right,
she said. Then she stuck out her left hand to display a ring encrusted with a dozen or so small jewels, all around a diamond that probably cost as much as a medium-sized house.
We were married 2 weeks ago,
she said. She did another little celebratory dance. I only had one question. Did she tell him the secret of the Sicilian pigeon before or after he proposed? She didn't say anything, but she gave me a little peck on the cheek, and then she gave me the bird, and I'm not talking about a pigeon either. She then danced her way out the door. I was very pleased with the contents of the envelope. There you go, folks. One of the most famous cases from the casebook of Jocko Clubbs. The hard-boiled detective with the soft-boiled brain. The train has been moving slow today, but it looks like we're coming up on your station. Thanks again for taking the Strange Express today. And until next time, happy rails to you.